Hey, it's your Friday episode of Locked On Raptors. Sean here with you as always. And on today's show, we're going to look ahead to the game against the Utah Jazz tonight. A very depleted and not at all recognizable Utah Jazz team, which continues a recent trend for your Toronto Raptors, playing teams that have been afflicted by injury and COVID. And today's guest, Katie Heindl, is joining me today to talk about that very sort of phenomenon. Does it matter that the Raptors are playing against teams that are incomplete? What can we actually take from this winning streak against said incomplete teams? We will talk about that and the Jazz game coming up tonight, all on today's episode of Locked On Raptors with Katie Heindl. Thanks for being here.
You are Locked On Raptors, your daily Toronto Raptors podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what's going on? Welcome to episode number 1092 of Locked On Raptors for Friday, January the 7th. I'm your host, Sean Woodley of RaptorsHQ.com. You can find me on Twitter, as always, at WoodleySean. You can find the show at Locked On Raptors, where you can find links to every single episode of the podcast. And, of course, please make sure to check us out on all your favorite podcast apps for free. You can subscribe, follow, rate, review, all that good stuff. And you can find us on YouTube, also for the low, low price of On the House. Just hit that big red subscribe button, and it's very much appreciated when you go ahead and do that. We're pushing near 1,400 subs on the YouTube page. It's a wonderful thing to see. Keep on building those numbers. And a reminder that it's always a lovely thank you to you to jump on and make us your first listen of the day. That was a clunky way to get that liner in, but that's fine. Today's episode is also brought to you by Prize Picks. Check out prizepicks.com. Use the promo code NBA or go to your app store and download the app today. Prize Picks is daily fantasy made easy. More on them a little bit later on. But now we begin the show with today's guest, Katie Heindl, who is here to talk about the Utah Jazz game tonight and the serious lack of strength of competition the Raptors have come across over the last week or so. They've rattled off some wins here and are now ahead up above 500. It's all very good, but how much does it matter? We will ask Katie. Katie, how's it going?
It's going good. It's going pretty good, man. I gotta say, I'm just warning you. I noticed every time I do a show and talk, smile, or laugh, I squeeze my AirPods out of my ear. They come out, so I'm always jamming them back in. So
You
I don't know
squeeze
why.
because the facial muscle, the muscles on your face are popping out of your ears. Okay,
moving up. I need to know. You know what? Sound off in the comments if this has ever happened to you, because I want to know if I just have a messed up kind of anomaly with my bone and muscle structure that's causing that to happen, or if it happens to other people.
Yeah, if there's any eye, nose, and throat specialists, ear, nose, and throat specialists, those doctor, the one that McSteamy is on Grey's Anatomy. If there's any of those listening and you have thoughts, please chime in. If there's any maxillofacial doctors or surgeons out there, let us know how the muscles in the face work so we can get to the bottom of this. But that's an interesting one, Katie. Did not expect that to be the way we lead off. I was expecting to lead off with just some king cake baby propaganda because our best friend is back. I know he's not involved in the Raptors orbit at all, but he's involved in all of our orbits now. He came back yesterday for his return to the glorious stage that is the time leading up to Mardi Gras. So any thoughts on the return of my dear friend?
Yeah, you texted me an awful picture, and I told you I was going to block your number. That's how I feel.
I gotta find the camera. That's why I texted to you. If you can see that on the camera, it's just the graphic that they posted. Yeah.
Frankly, I'm kind of surprised they don't keep that guy around all year now.
Yeah, they should. Yeah, he's their most prized asset ahead of Zion, frankly. He should be a part of the team more often, I say. But that's, an argument for another day and probably another podcast, frankly. Let's get into it today, Katie. The Toronto Raptors take on the Utah Jazz tonight, looking for their fifth straight win, looking to move to 19-17. They are looking pretty good. But again, they continue the sort of run here of playing against teams that are totally depleted. Yesterday, we went back to March 2020 as Rudy Gobert entered the COVID protocols, and the Jazz are very, very afflicted with either COVID or injury. I'm starting to wonder if maybe there is a bit of reticence to pick everything up and move across the border for a single game when you're a team like the Utah Jazz or the Golden State Warriors, where you clearly have bigger ambitions in mind. So maybe this is the home court advantage the Raptors never knew they were going to have. Isn't that a blast? But either way, Katie, like with this game tonight, again, it's now going to be 5 straight games against incomplete teams with, important players of the lineup. And in the case of the Jazz tonight, let me pull up the available players per Sarah Todd, who does a great job covering the Jazz. These are the players available for them tonight: Trent Forrest, Eric Pascal, Jared Butler, Elijah Hughes, Udoka Azubuike, Malik Fitz, and then 10-day Daniel House is expected to be made official ahead of the game. That is 8 players, very few of whom I think most casual NBA fans have ever heard of. What are your thoughts going into this game tonight, Katie? It's sort of the inverse of that Cavs-Raptors game from about a week and a half ago.
Mostly that I hope Mike Conley's doing well. I don't begrudge him. If he wants to stay home with his family, that's fine. But for the rest of them, yeah, this is a pretty sparse roster. You make a good point about teams that are already perhaps depleted because of health and safety protocols, not necessarily wanting to stretch themselves further by taking a trip across the border. Though I really think that as like a talking point, it doesn't really wait. All that means is like you got to potentially at the airport, you got to be double vaccinated. Maybe if you get COVID here, you have to stay isolated. Well, not even 14 days anymore. It's about 5. And I bet teams have
I think that's the concern, right? That's the main
way
one.
to work around that. Yeah. Anyway, I think it's good for the Raptors when you've got Toronto coming back now, still getting back to full strength in the sense too of a lot of these guys getting used to playing together again. You know what I mean? I don't think it's the worst thing to give a little bit of a soft re-entry in that sense, right? To get things to kind of get their legs under them. Not that is looking pretty complete. I'd say OG Anunoby's looking this starting, hopefully, fingers crossed, rest of the season, and looks pretty fully formed to be so. They're looking very good together. Super intuitive play. It's not the worst thing, but I don't know. Yeah, that's kind of I don't feel like, it's not competitive enough because wait, it's January.
Yeah. It's January. Yeah,
It's
not even. I
January.
wish it was February.
Yeah.
That sounds like maybe a month further away from this current hell. That sounds great.
Well, we'll still be in like a different type of hell then. But I'm sure.
Oh yeah, it's just an evolving shape that the hell takes.
Yeah, say we're just kind of in a slump. Yeah. We're in a slump of winter, January, February, leading up to the All-Star break. So this kind of stretch is always a little bit touch and go.
Yeah, and I will say, like, look, I wish the Raptors could play against like a real sort of challenging team that would give them sort of a real sort of proof of concept of what their vision is against a team that actually, has their guys and is as they're sort of intended. But I'm also not going to feel bad about the Raptors racking up some wins against some depleted teams, because guess what happened last year in Tampa Bay is all of these teams racked up wins against the depleted Raptors. And it was just the way it was. And so, like, I there was only so much you could do about it last year, and you could just sort of hand wring and complain and all of that and say, hey, NBA, cancel these games. And they didn't, because that's not what their MO is. And ultimately, now that the Raptors are on the other side, it's unfortunate for the other teams that are coming through, but it's also, hey, like kind of a bit of cosmic retribution that I'll gladly take. And the other thing too, and I think this point was made by Twitter user, listener to the show, B-Ball Thinking on Twitter, pointed out that like this is kind of the preseason the Raptors never really got. Obviously, there was no Pascal Siakam to start the year because he was coming back from shoulder surgery, so they never got to see their full sort of complement of guys from the very beginning. And then they get like 4 games after the return of Siakam before OG goes down, and they have that whole spell where they're missing guys night in, night out. Obviously, COVID comes after that. Like, this is finally a chance to get these guys some run together. And so, yeah, it might not mean that much in terms of like, oh, these last 4 games tell me that the Raptors are actually a team that's going to win at a 100% win percentage. But I do think it's a valuable thing for this team to have going forward as the schedule does toughen up in the coming weeks, as early as next week as the Phoenix Suns come to town. So that's kind of where I'm at on that. We are going to pivot from here. There's not much to preview about the Jazz game, if we're being totally honest. I'm sure the pick and roll coverages on Trent Forrest will be very, geared towards stopping him, their best player tonight. But we're going to sort of move this conversation, Katie, and dig into what is real from the 4 games that we've seen with this healthy roster together, mostly healthy in the case of the last Friday's game against the Clippers. But let's dig into, what's real, what's not, and what can we actually pry away from these 4 games to potentially give Raptors fans hope that they could continue on throughout the rest of the season as the schedule presumably toughens up at some point here. We'll get to that in just one second here, Katie. But first, want to tell everybody about our friends over at Prize Picks. Prize Picks is daily fantasy made easy. And if you have not checked it out, you are missing out. I'm telling you, you're going to love this app for NBA and mixed sport pick'em. And there's lots of wonderful things for you to go and check out. They have the best NBA DFS prop game on the market. Prize Picks offers more NBA props than any other DFS prop operator and offers all the superstar players as well as bench players and only recording a handful of minutes each game. Imagine a DFS app where you can put money down on Pascal Siakam and Justin Champagnie in the same bet. That is a fantastic deal. Prize Picks offers any prop you can think of, from points, assists, rebounds, threes made, etc. All of the users that deposit and use the promo code will receive a 100% instant deposit match. That promo code to use is just NBA. So you put in $100, up to $100 they'll match. You get a 100% bonus match. So you put in $100, you get $200 in your account. That's a wonderful deal. You pick 2 to 5 players and an over/under on their projections. You can win up to 10 times on any entry, and it's just you versus the projected number. There's no sort of shadow expert behind the scenes setting a roster that's unbeatable. It's just you against the projections. And you can do multiple sport entries as well. So you can take the over on Joel Embiid combined with the under on Aaron Rodgers, or whatever it is you might want to do. You can use their award-winning app on both the App Store or Google Play. Entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. It's that easy, and Prize Picks is safe and offers fast cash withdrawals. So go to prizepicks.com today. Use the promo code NBA on your App Store and download the app. Prize Picks is daily fantasy made easy. If you're not playing Prize Picks, you honestly don't know what you're missing. And today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Shopify. Cha-ching, you hear that sound? It's the sound of another sale on Shopify, the all-in-one commerce platform to start, run, and grow your business. Shopify gives entrepreneurs the resources once reserved only for big businesses, so upstart startups and established businesses alike can sell everywhere, synchronize online and in-person sales, and effortlessly stay informed. Scaling your business is a journey of endless possibilities, so why not go on that journey with Shopify? Shopify powers millions of businesses from first sale to full scale. You can reach customers online and across social networks with an ever-growing suite of channel integrations and apps, including Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Pinterest, and more. And you can gain insights as you grow with detailed reporting of conversion rates, profit margins, and beyond. More than a store, Shopify grows with you. This is possibility powered by Shopify. Go to shopify.com/lockedNBA, all lowercase, for a free 14-day trial and get full access to Shopify's entire suite of features. That is shopify.com/lockedNBA. Grow your business today with shopify.com/lockedNBA. And we continue on here with Katie Heindl, trying to pull some things from the last 4 games, a winning streak for your Toronto Raptors against some pretty depleted teams that actually might mean something as we go forward here. Katie, I'll just throw it to you. Like, what's something for you that you think is going to stick? It can be anything. It can be the Pascal Siakam playmaking. It can be Fred VanVleet unleashing off-ball doom for any teams that forget to account for him as he's scurrying around the perimeter. It can be a smaller thing like that. It can be that Justin Champagnie is here to stay. Is there anything from the last 4 games, Katie, that you think really holds tangible meaning for the Raptors as they move forward throughout the rest of the season?
Muted.
You're muted, yes.
I think Fred's offensive prowess really coming through. I don't know what this has gone up to after the Bucks game, but prior to the Bucks game, I think he was 48% shoot threes. I think that's something that's probably going to stick around. We've got a fair shot at it now that the roster is looking more fulsome and he doesn't have to do absolutely everything. He's straight up to shoot a lot more and to take those shots, which is great. I think something I've liked is Scotty Barnes as this like backup point guard role. I think that's like a fantastic call going forward, especially when you want to look at mismatches against, once teams get back to full strength playing the Raptors, they're really going to have to capitalize on mismatches and kind of unsettling their opponents that way. So if you've got Scotty Barnes kind of fluidly going between lineups as a point guard, I like that. I also just like that generally for his development overall as a rookie. I think Gary Trent Jr. has been a really great and sort of, I don't mean complete surprise, like I'm shocked. I mean complete in the kind of player he's shown that he is, as just like a super sponge who is very intelligent at making the right kind of call as necessarily as the team needs. I want to say like OG Anunoby, but like I feel like we don't have enough yet. But I think OG Anunoby just being generally great overall as he was before he was out. As the steadiness of this roster, there's a lot of like relief, I think, in them playing. Like you could see that a bit in Pascal Siakam's game and just like some levity to it. And it makes sense. Like the comment that you mentioned before of this being sort of the preseason the Raptors never got all together. So I think if they can sort of carry this through, I don't think there's a reason that it will, touch wood, barring like more health and safety protocols and injuries. I think that this can definitely carry through into the rest of the season. And they can remain kind of a really like a really scary prospect for a lot of matchups.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think in particular, like starting five stuff is where I'm really kind of gleaning my takeaways right now. I think the bench will be fluid and we'll see where certain guys slot in, where Yuta Watanabe and Svi Mykhailiuk fit in once they get back from protocol. Svi's back tonight, it seems, by the way, so that's good. And Yuta remains the only guy in the protocols for the Raptors. But with the starters, I mean, I do think just sort of watching them play together, regardless of who the opponent is a win. And you're getting to see sort of how the sort of pieces interlock and connect. And I think that is sort of the big value of this stretch of season, like you mentioned, and like I mentioned earlier, the preseason idea kind of holding up there. I'm glad you mentioned Fred, because I think if there's anything that is super sustainable from this, it's that Fred should be able to kind of perform at a more efficient offensive level than he even did when he was very efficient and had like a 57.5 true shooting for most of the season as the team's number one option, initiating basically every time down the floor. Like that was a very difficult workload that he was pulling off and still had a very efficient season to show for it. And now we're seeing that he doesn't have to do that all the time. Pascal Siakam is finding him with like 6 open passes a game for wide open threes. And you have Scotty Barnes doing it as well. And it's just a way healthier half court offense and a way healthier environment for Fred VanVleet to kind of eat within. You mentioned his catch and shoot numbers on the season. To this point on the year, he's a 51% shooter from catch and shoots. He's been 58.3 since over the last 4 games on catch and shoots, and 34.5 on pull-ups. He's been at 31.5 on pull-ups this season as well. So again, it's a four game sample. It's a small sample, but I think you're seeing, even if it's maybe a jump that's a little overzealous, and I don't think he's going to be a north of 50% catch and shoot guy all season long, because that's very, very hard to do. I think the general trend of him ticking up in both his catch and shoot and pull-ups, because of all the sort of help around him and the lack of an overextended burden on him, is really kind of the thing to take away here. So that I think should continue. If it's not 58% on catch and shoots for the rest of the season, that's fine, because he's got plenty of wiggle room to still be bloody effective. And I think that by extension, I think we're seeing like this playmaking from Siakam over the last 4 games. He's at 6.5 assists, nearly just like 0.2 away from team lead, actually, where Fred's at 6.5 as well. And I think Pascal's at 6.3. Do you kind of see this shifting of Siakam maybe being kind of more of the playmaker initiator type on the team? Is that something else you think it should continue on here? Obviously, any good, healthy offense does not run entirely through one guy, and there are going to be guys who get their shots. OG has been, I think, a perfect sort of complimentary guy. He's going to get his moments to sort of go and cook. But as far as Siakam kind of running things and the offense kind of flowing through him in most ways, like that's been kind of a newer thing. He's been doing it all season, but not to this extent, I would say, over the last 4 games or so. Do you think that sort of uptick in sort of general responsibility for Siakam is something that should stick as well?
Yeah, I think if it's something that he continues to show that he's comfortable with doing, I would just say there's only one caveat, and that's in the past. It seems like when you load up Pascal Siakam with a little bit too much, um, like too many asks
Hmm.
offensively on the floor, he's not necessarily able to orchestrate those right to like the to
Hmm.
his full potential, and then you start to see things, just even like his finishing and other like little things here and there taper off. Haven't actually seen that so far with him, with like some more of the playmaking running through him. So again, if this is just an improvement in his game and his overall capabilities offensively on the floor this season as a leader, then I think definitely keep that responsibility in his hands because, as we said, it frees up Fred on that end as well, which I think is good. It lets like Gary get a little bit more opportunities, Scotty get more opportunities, OG get some opportunities again now that he's back, which is good. So yeah, I mean, unless it starts like again, like I think unless there starts to be a bit of a nosedive and he
Hmm.
looks a little bit strung out, which he hasn't at all this season. I want to clarify,
No.
like he's really not. He doesn't really seem overburdened by anything. So that's great.
Yeah, for sure. Again, it's really difficult to try and glean what matters from these 4 games that have happened on this
Hmm.
streak. But, there are things that, I think honestly, this is kind of more where eye test comes in and just sort of like general feel of what it looks like out there. And you can kind of, transpose a good team in the place of the team that you're seeing, this version of the Raptors kind of dice up. And you can envision how their formula would be successful against a team that has more guys available. That said, I'm sure there are some things that are not going to hold up because, better players and better opponents and better defenses are going to prevent those things from holding up. I want to get into some of those things in just a second here, Katie. But first, I want to tell everybody about our friends over at Built Bar. Best tasting protein bars in the game. They are the protein bar that tastes like a candy bar. And there's no better way to help with your New Year's resolution than to bust up the Built Bars. They have a lot of wonderful flavors for you to try out. And if you are like me, trying to wean yourself off the garbage you ate for a couple weeks during the holidays there, then Built Bars are the way to go. Most Built Bars contain 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 grams of net carbs, and 17 grams of protein. Compare that with a candy bar, which has around 240 calories, 30 grams of sugar, and dozens of net carbs. And I can tell you, some of those flavors out there of your candy bars are not bringing you any protein whatsoever. And well, here's an idea for the new year. If you're like me, also, you have little secret stashes where you keep your junk food. Why don't you go and clear out those stashes if you haven't already and throw some Built Bars in there and replace those stashes with something that is indulgent, but it's not going to make you feel bad about it. And they have lots of wonderful flavors. There's a flavor for everybody to find and love and choose. So go to built.com to see what's new. Limited time flavors pop up in there for time to time as well. Valentine's Day is coming up in like a month. They will have certainly lots of flavors geared towards Valentine's Day. Go to built.com, use the promo code, and get 15% off your order. The promo code, of course, is locked15 and get 15% off at built.com on your next order. Go do it up. Your next ardor. I went pirate there a little bit. Arr, your next ardor. Anyway, Katie, let's continue on here and round out the show. Want to dig into some things that may or may not be sustainable through these 4 games. And I think the first thing I want to go to is rebounding, Katie. I think we've seen the concerns about the lack of a quote unquote center kind of die down a little bit here in the last few games. Winning will do that. Oh, this roster can win games. Maybe it's fine. I've been very staunch on this podcast and my sort of like, I think the center position is just fine. You can worry about it at a later date if you need to make an upgrade to go and take on a contender or something like that. But they're not in a position right now where that needs to be a priority because they have 7,000 guys who are playing the 3, 4, or 5 position on a given night. That's just the way the roster's built. Everybody is a big, so who cares? But the thing that I think was sort of a concern for this Raptors team most of the season after a really hot start was defensive rebounding and rebounding in general. Their offensive rebounding, of course, has been a big part of their offense. That's been sort of one of those sneaky ways they've been able to defy some of their sort of underwhelming numbers when it comes to like the half court and specific play types and all of that. They have been able to counteract that with just like killing the offensive boards, winning the possession game and all of that. But the defensive rebounding has not been good for the most part this season. Over the last 4 games, the Raptors are at a 75.3 defensive rebounding percentage. That is number 6 in the NBA, Katie, and they are the third best rebounding team overall, as their offensive rebounding has hung right where you kind of expected to be, a 34.7 offensive rebounding percentage, number 2 in the NBA behind the Grizzlies. They've essentially been number 2 behind the Grizzlies all season long in that department. So not much change there, but the defensive rebounding very much has changed on the season. Just let me pull up again. Last 4 games, they are 6th all season long. They come in as the 29th best defensive rebounding team in the NBA, 69.9%. I had to scroll very far on NBA.com there, Katie. Is this rebounding uptick sustainable to you, Katie? And obviously, Pascal Siakam feels like he's kind of intrinsically tied to this, considering the rebounding totals he's put up recently. That is an interesting one. What say you? Can the Raptors keep up this recent rebounding resurgence? Look at that alliteration. I'm so good. Anyway, carry on.
Well, I think they're going to have to, because this is where a lot of close games are turning around for them. This is where they're sort of injecting some energy into their offense, I think, that was missing before. Granted, I will say that, like, for not having a quote unquote big, like you've seen, I think, like in that Bucks game, the amount of times you saw Gary Trent Jr. get in extremely close in the paint and just like pop up again and again for rebounds, against like guys twice his size and not getting out muscled. It's pretty impressive, right? So that's great. I think like the defensive rebounding obviously is not great, but I think that speaks a little bit more to, like, I don't know, kind of where they're trying to, I guess, focus on right
Sure.
now, which is at the offensive end. One thing I will say, and I guess this is why I'm glad there's like a little bit of an uptick, and I would like to equate it to this, is that all season long, even before the season started, we've been hearing about, the length of this team and the capabilities of that. Like, everybody super tall, super long arms, right? Like, really strong. But you haven't actually seen that bear out in rebounding numbers, which is a little bit strange. You've seen it in other ways, notably, I think, with a lot of passing, and like kind of like in the paint. And there were some really nice sequences, I think, with like strips and steals and like passing and like quick transitions back up the floor in that Bucks game, where you did see that length come into account a little bit more. And I liked it, because I was like, oh, this is what we wanted, from the length. And like, I guess this was what Masai Ujiri and Bobby Webster like pictured when they were putting this like very long team together. So I'd like to see that, though, like factor a little bit more into the rebounding, because you'd think it should give them a little bit of a leg up in that sense. But to me also, this just strikes me as they're trying to focus on, Nick Nurse wants them to focus on one thing at a time, which is fair.
Yeah, totally. I think, the Raptors have gotten by not being a very good rebounding team in recent years, right? They weren't a very good rebounding team in the championship season. They weren't a very good rebounding team in 2019-20, but their defense was good enough that it was like, oh, we have a ton of margin for error. We can give up some offensive rebounds, because we're probably going to force a miss on that collected miss as well, because we're that good. And I don't think the Raptors defense is in that position right now, but I think with some time together, like, there's no reason to think that it can't become a little bit more of a sort of haunting defense to play against, where they're getting turnovers to kind of offset their lack of rebounding. Like, I don't think they're going to be the number 6 defensive rebounding team in the NBA all year. Again, it's 4 games and it's not very good teams. The Knicks didn't have either of their starting bigs available. Giannis wasn't playing for the Bucks. Like, there's reasons why they've been able to kind of feast on the boards, I think, in addition to maybe like an own sort of renewed effort on doing that and having all of your big available guys. And honestly, they play pretty big, right? Like, that's, I think, something that maybe is sustainable. We need to see more of a sample of it. Is like, all 4 of the guys they're bringing off the bench right now are quote unquote big. Because I know Champagne's like 6'6", and there's like a sort of, where do we classify him? Is he a wing? Is he a big? He plays like a big. He's around the basket. He's offensive rebounding. He's playing in those sort of soft spots. Like, he plays like a big man. And so they're bringing in all of these guys who maybe none of them on their own are incredible rebounders, although Kem Birch is quite solid, but they're all pretty good. And that is sort of helping them, I think, kind of stay afloat, especially in these second units where everybody on the floor is 6'8" or bigger. like it's a little bit easier to rebound and sort of gang rebound it and not have to worry about, okay, who's the center doing the box out and grabbing the, like everyone just can kind of do it, which is nice. So maybe that is something that is a sign because they're playing bigger. They're not playing Malachi Flynn. Svi Mihailuk seems like he's maybe going to be sort of like a fringy rotation piece flipping back and forth with Yuta Watanabe. With those guys no longer in the picture, everyone on the team is kind of like a plus rebounder. And I'm not saying Sphere is not in the picture. Flynn certainly is not. But like everybody out there, except for maybe Boucher, I would say, is a plus rebounder in some regard, which is kind of nice. And maybe this is something where they can kind of turn this around now that they're at full strength. And maybe it's sort of like a domino effect type thing where you lose one guy and it becomes a little bit more difficult to have that sort of effect on the glass. And once you get to full strength, it just becomes a little bit more ironclad. I don't know. I'm just theorizing right now, but that is going to be a big one because, of course, we know that if this Raptors team is winning the possession game, good things are going to happen because their offense is performing at a level we did not expect. Like it's been kind of floating around top 10 all season long. And I think you're seeing, if we're going back to things that you can kind of take away, like having five guys who were constantly a threat in that starting five is doing good things. There's tons of space for guys to operate. There's help being sent Siakam's way or OG's way when they're posting up or driving, and that's opening up things for other people. The half court offense feels a little bit more sustainably strong. And if the defensive rebounding clears up, I mean, you're kind of removing a lot of the holes on this team. And again, we'll have to see what they do against better opponents. The Pelicans coming through on Sunday, maybe not that sort of ilk of team, but hopefully they're healthy and fully, together. So it's a bit of a test. And then, of course, next week, the Suns come through town, which will be a wonderful test for the Raptors in Toronto as well. Katie, any last lingering thoughts here on sort of things that, you're keeping your eye on as the Raptors continue forward here, looking to continue their streak tonight and into the weekend?
Mainly, I'm just keeping my eye on the nice continuity. Granted, as we've said a couple of times, it's been 4 games, but to have what looks like a pretty solid, stable starting lineup again, that feels
Mm-hmm.
great.
Yeah, absolutely. That feels like a pretty good place to leave this one off. I do just want to actually offer a one parting shot here, Katie. And this has nothing to do with anything we talked about today. It's about All-Star because the first voting returns came in yesterday. Look, Fred VanVleet is better than Derrick Rose and Kyrie Irving and whoever the hell is ahead of him in voting. Obviously, the voting system is flawed. Having fans vote, maybe not the greatest thing in the world. I don't really totally understand the anger that VanVleet's not higher. I guess he's going to get in probably as a coach's pick. That's probably his only avenue because there's only 2 guards that get voted in, and DeMar is going to be one, and one of James Harden or Trae Young was always going to be the other one voted in. So I don't totally understand the hand wringing. Obviously, Fred VanVleet deserves to be an all-star. We've talked about that on this very podcast before. But like the sort of Toronto Raptors Twitter meltdown that happens every once in a while around this time of year, probably not necessary this year because this was never going to be the way by which VanVleet got into the All-Star game anyway. And also the fan vote counts for like 25% of the actual vote in this round of starters voting. So that was just me wanting to get on my soapbox for 1 second. Katie, do you have any All-Star takes before we get out of here, or do you not care at all?
I mean, I care for Fred because I think it means quite a bit to him. And I would actually, to go off what you said, I would actually say, given the smallish sample size, I'm sure of Raptors fans who voted, smaller sample size in comparison to where a lot of these other votes are coming from for other players, I think Raptors fans should be pretty happy that Fred got to be where he is. Like, I think to me that bears out as like, oh, a lot of like people in Toronto and Canada, wherever, voted for him. So I think, yeah, like when you consider the fan vote is only 25% in the end, that Fred's on that list is great.
Yeah, it's cool. It's wonderful. And, we don't need to sort of like throw our arms up in displeasure at the unfortunate names that appear on those lists every year because they're there every year. It's just the state of the hell world we live in that players who are not deserving of any sort of plaudits get, sixth in all-star voting for some reason. Anyway, I'm not going to name any names because that is how you get swarmed on the internet. So we will round out the show here today, Katie. Anything you would like to promote for the good people out there? You had yourself a hell of a week writing.
Yeah, and it's still going. But I will promote I profiled Jonathan Kuminga. So that's on Dime. That came out earlier this week. I also wrote about DeMar DeRozan's full circle kind of journey to where he's at in Chicago, and that's on Real GM. I'll have something coming out about Klay Thompson a little later, and I will also no, you know what? You're just gonna have to wait and see. But I'll have something very near and dear to Toronto fans' hearts coming out very soon.
Ooh, I like the sounds of that. Wow, I can't even begin to guess what that is. I'm excited. I'm going to ask you off air what it's all about. You can find me on Twitter, of course, at Woodley Sean. You can subscribe to, rate, review, tell a friend, all that good stuff. It's so appreciated when you go ahead and do that. We'll be back again tomorrow, actually. I'm going to do a Saturday episode to break down the Jazz game. If it ends up being a game where they win by 70,000 points over a depleted Jazz team, we'll see if I end up doing a podcast on Saturday. I want to be totally upfront with you. It might not be totally necessary, but either way, potential podcast tomorrow, and then we'll be back again on Monday, of course, with your usual breakdown of the Pelicans game and a look ahead to the week where the schedule kind of toughens up a little bit for your Toronto Raptors. Subscribe, rate, review, tell a friend, all that good stuff, and all your apps for free. You can also subscribe on YouTube, which is much appreciated as always. And you can go make your second listen of the day, Locked On Bets, with your boy Q and Lee Sterling, cutting through all the noise and confusion of the COVID-stricken era of sports and still helping you win some money. So go and check them out over at Locked On Bets. That'll do it. We'll talk to you again soon with another episode of Locked On Raptors. Bye-bye.